Once you have your refined die line in hand, you have to get it to the die maker. Now, typically die makers do not use a graphics program like Adobe Illustrator to create the cutting die, so you may be required to offer a different file format. You can ask the printer or the converter for this information as they work directly with the die maker or perhaps have an in-house resource. Now, you'll also need to know how they would like you to transfer the file to them. So if the die maker doesn't use something like Adobe Illustrator, what file formats do they use? Well, there are several, but typically you're going to find them falling in the CAD category, so computer-aided design here. And one of the bigger names in this is AutoCAD. And from Illustrator, you can actually export out a AutoCAD DWG file or drawing file, or perhaps even a DXF file. Other acceptable formats would include the Enhanced Meta file or EMF file, and a Windows Meta file or .wmf file. So let's take a look at how we can export these file types directly from Illustrator. So here I have my refined die and I'm ready to send this to the die maker. Now be sure to check with your converter because they may accept a Illustrator file, but if they don't, how do we convert this into something they can accept? Well, it's quite simple. If I go up to the File menu and I choose Export, here at the bottom, I have different formats. And so you can see I have the two AutoCADs, the DWG and DXF file. I also have the Enhanced Meta, and finally the Windows Meta files. So I'm going to go back up to probably the most common one, which is the AutoCAD drawing or DWG file. I'm going to select this file format, and I'm going to export this content. Next, you'll be presented with a window full of options. Be sure to check with your converter here to see if there's any special settings they need for you to choose. I'm going to leave the defaults here and just tell it OK. And then Illustrator will convert my AI file into this drawing file. The process holds true for the other file types. There may just be some different options there. Now that we have our Illustrator die line converted over to the proper format, how do we transfer it to the die maker? Well, there's several options here. The file is probably small enough to where you could email it as an attachment. You could also use a web upload feature. Now, this can come in many forms. There could be an FTP site or a private site that is hosted by the converter or printer. You could also use a file transfer service like Adobe Send Now. And then, of course, there are file sharing services like Dropbox or Google Drive. If you can't use one of these services, then you could always fall back to an optical media such as CD or DVD, or perhaps even a flash drive. The key thing to remember here is just to make sure that it is an appropriate format for the die maker. So, if they're working on a Windows-based machine, you want to make sure that your media and your flash drive is formatted for that type of device. If they're working on a Mac, then you want to be sure that it's formatted for that type of device. Now that your die line is safely in the hands of the die maker, you can continue your work on the package design. Soon, you will receive the final die line from the die maker. You will want to incorporate this into your layout to ensure your design fits the final packaging. We will cover this process a little later on in the course.